Will you pray with me? Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the thoughts of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
January was one hell of a year, wasn't it? And it just keeps going. If you've been following this impeachment saga at all, you know what I mean. It seems like we've been in an existential battle for the soul of America for quite a long time, but these last 3 years and this last month have brought it into stark relief. And we shouldn't be surprised. Trump campaigned on dividing us up, on treating opponents as enemies. His Twitter feed, which might be him now, is wielded like a weapon, mocking and slandering at will. His policies target the most vulnerable. They are rooted in ignorance and animated by cruelty. Amen. In fact, as it's often been said, his cruelty isn't a bug in the plants, it's a feature. Cruelty is the point. The idea that this man will remain in office with his power unchecked has me tiptoeing toward despair, which is not usually me. I'm usually much more optimistic than that. But this whole process has really gotten into my head, and maybe it's gotten into yours. I'm not sleeping well. I'm carrying an ever-present sense of anxiety, and not just anxiety, grief. I feel like I'm watching our values and ideals get strangled by the very people who are supposed to lift them up. My heart is breaking for our country, our imperfect, exasperating, fragile experiment of a country. And I just don't really know what to do with all these feelings. And so rather unprofessionally, I'm bringing them to you. Ideally, pastors are supposed to be a vehicle, to help others wrestle with these feelings, to sidestep our own emotions and let others have theirs, point through the pain to some kind of healing. But I don't know how to be that pastor right now, so please forgive me. But I am really glad to be here. I'm really glad to be together here. This place always makes me feel a little bit better about the world. Because here we hear a different story and we create a different kind of family. And even in times, especially in times like this, it gives me hope. And today we could not have heard two more powerful counter narratives than the ones that we shared this morning. And I'd like to note that you noticed the Beatitudes were a little differently this morning. Reverend Heather noticed on the back of our bulletins was that marvelous version of the Beatitudes, and in the spur of the moment, thank you, Sam, very much for rolling with it. We decided to share that version to really bring it home. So it's on the back of your bulletins if you want to take that home with you. You see, both of these texts, Micah and Matthew, are a profound antidote to the cruelty-based culture that we are living in right now. They both speak to us of God's deepest truth. That when the world is all about power and wealth and cruelty, here's what God asks. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with me. It's not the strong who are most important, it's the weak, God says. It's not the rich who are blessed, it's the poor. It's not the bullies who will inherit the earth, it's the gentle ones. And that's where Jesus says we will find God. Now those were startling ideas then, and they are just as startling now. For while we are not exactly living under the brutal oppression of the Roman Empire, we are nonetheless living in a culture that rewards ruthlessness. Bullying is not just something for the grade school playground anymore. It follows the kids home, online, and magnifies the pain and ridicule on social media. We love to watch reality shows where people are betrayed or humiliated for our entertainment. Political rallies whip people up into an us versus them froth of hostility as the audience chants for folks to be locked up or sent back where they came from. Now I know that into this reality, The words of Micah or Jesus can just sound so naive, right? So toothless. Hardly a match for the vitriol of the moment. What difference can it make if we do justice and love kindness and walk humbly if we're just going to get voted off the island by someone who plays rough and doesn't care? In a world this cruel, is kindness enough? The word kind, as we often use it today, is really rather discounted, isn't it? Derided as too bland, too basic. Kind is the thing we say about someone when we want to say something vaguely positive but can't think of anything better. When we think of kindness, we often think of being nice or polite or thoughtful, not exactly the stuff of revolutions. But for the prophet Micah, kindness was not a bland placeholder word. Kindness is the heart of everything. He uses the Hebrew word hesed, which means loving kindness, but not our loving kindness, God's. God's loving kindness, the source of every good act. When we show kindness for each other, we are acting like God. In fact, the name Micah means one who is like God. In the Greek language of the New Testament, the word kind is Christos, and it too means far more than a single act of niceness. Christos is a way of life, rooted in a deep respect for one another. It's a recognition of our shared humanity, our shared frailty, that our lives are interconnected and interdependent, that we need each other. Fast forward several centuries into the Middle Ages, and we arrive at the Old English word that we might recognize, kind, spelled K-Y-N-D-E, which is rooted in the word kin, meaning we are actually related, part of the same group. Kindness means likeness, and to be kind is to recognize that we are family to each other. So there's that interconnection thing again. And I think that's why we tend to minimize that word these days. We don't necessarily want to be connected to each other. We prize our individuality, our independence. We want to be unique, not part of a crowd, responsible really only for ourselves. Caring about other people gets messy and inconvenient really fast. As persons, as people, it's easier to distance ourselves from others, ignore them, or criticize them than it is to reach out and help. We aren't like them, we say. We don't need to care. And our country looks at those who are weaker, or stranger, or poorer, or more vulnerable than we are, and takes it even further, attempts to build a wall to shut them out. To be kind would be to recognize that we are not just like those folks at the border. We are those folks at the border. We are kin with them. We share the same fears and hopes and longings. We wrestle with the same doubts and challenges. To say we are kin with someone means our lives are intertwined with theirs, and what we say and how we act toward them has consequences, not just for us, but for the world. And we know that cruelty has consequences. I know that many of us are struggling with how to respond in this political moment of our nation's history. Just this week, as the Senate fell in line behind him, our president did more, though. He said he intends to reduce the number of folks receiving Medicaid. He wants to reject any immigrants that need social services. And he's narrowed the people eligible for food stamps. And his crowd cheers. Now, the financial benefit to our nation's bottom line is minimal. But the message is clear. If you need us, we're not here for you. We don't see you. We don't care. And this feels like a body blow to those of us who do care or need care. Of course, the most effective way in a macro sense that we can deal with this level of callous injustice is to vote in November. To vote out those people who support this cruelty and vote in those people who believe that we are indeed responsible for and to each other. Now that is the high-level response, and it matters like hell, but it's not all that we can do. We don't really need to wait 10 months to start seeing or caring or responding to cruelty, because the true change doesn't happen at the ballot box. It begins with us, with seeing God in the person in front of us. And it begins by letting them see God in us too, and then acting like God would act. Creating real human community has the power to change cruelty to compassion. And we can do it now, in our own lives, in our own communities, in our own families. We can take the time to see each other and to say, we're kin to each other. We are family. Those moments, they sometimes seem so small and so inconsequential, but they really do matter. Hold the door for someone. Have an encouraging word for that tired clerk at the grocery store. Share a joke with the person waiting in line with you at the DMV. Let someone cut in front of you in traffic without laying on your horn. And Jersey, I know that's hard. Say please. Say thank you. Pay for the coffee of the person behind you at Starbucks and scoot out before they realize it. Put down your phone and listen to your child, or your partner, or your parent when they have something they really want to share with you. Judge less, forgive more. When someone stops and asks you for spare change, if you've got it, give more than they expect. But most importantly, look them in the eye and smile as you do so. Ask them their name. Let them know that you see them as a human being with dignity. Let them know that you see God in them. Let them know they are kin to you. Our greatest weapon against a world that wants to divide us is to become more connected to each other, to be more kind. I know it feels so small right now in the face of all we are dealing with, but if we make it a way of life, it can start a revolution. Because kindness also has consequences. It isn't bland or weak or basic. Kindness is courageous and risk-taking. Seeing God in the face of another can be some scary stuff. But when kindness becomes a way of life for us, it can shift how we are in the world. It breaks down barriers. It allows us to be our most human, most authentic selves and create a culture of compassion and respect like the one we have in this place. And that can counteract a world of cruelty. Real human connection changes the whole equation. So let's start here, now, today. Take a look at the people who are with you in this room, the people sitting around you. We're here together. We see each other. We hear each other. We need each other, and we care about each other. And I feel better just being with all of you this morning. Thank you for being my family. Thank you for being my kin. May it be so. Amen.